Good evening, everyone. My name is Jonathan Dover, and I am here with Michelle Miners and Stanley Milford Jr., and we are the Paranormal Rangers. So we are going to introduce ourselves to you today. So the title is pretty much Getting to Know the Paranormal Rangers. And so we'll get going here. We'll start with Michelle because ladies first. And Michelle, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from and all that good stuff?
Thanks, Jonathan, and good to be on this new show, second season with KGRA. It's wonderful to have our first episode or show on this network, and we are now our show is called the Paranormal Rangers, for those of you listening. And so my name is Michelle Miners. I joined the Rangers last year when John and Stan uh, asked me to come on board. And I had spent some significant time in the Uinta Basin studying the paranormal phenomena that exist up there. Where I started was on Skinwalker Ranch, assisting one of the cast members of the show, The Mystery of Skinwalker Ranch, which was Jim Morse. And I assisted him on looking after the ranch for some time and found some very interesting phenomena that occurred there and I had experienced. I'm currently living in the Utah area, um, and go back and forth on occasions back up to the Uinta Basin. The paranormal experience with the Rangers this last year, we had another show and it went really, really well. And we hope our audience has moved over with us to be a part of this next season. We are excited to be here. And I'm excited to be a part of this investigative team. And we hope that in the future that we'll have some really wonderful things to share of our experiences and future things that we're investigating. That's me in a nutshell.
Now, Michelle, uh, I couldn't help but notice that you are Native American. Can you tell us a little bit about your Native American background?
Oh, sure, sure, of course. That's very obvious. And thank you, Jonathan. I am of three Native American tribes, one being the Navajo Nation, the other one is Pawnee, and I'm also Ojibwe, which is Chippewa of the Chippewa Allegonian Nation. Those are my three tribes. I am 100% Native American and of three different bloodlines from tribes from the East Coast, the Midwest, and the Southwest area. So that's who I am.
So you got the whole U.S. covered, don't you?
I pretty much do.
And and you're what we call FBI, which is full-blooded Indian.
Full-blooded Indian. And it's so interesting you say that parts of Canada also, some of my Ojibwe lines come from the French Canadian area as well. So I cover pretty much North America.
Well, good deal. We're happy to have you on board, and we've been making Michelle work. She was our producer on our last podcast, and also footing some of the bills for that. And we've graduated now, and now we're with KGRA, and so we've taken a step up in the podcast world. Stan, why don't you tell us about yourself and then I'm sure Stan has a book, and we'll be uh, giving you links to that later on. But go ahead and talk to us, Stan.
First, welcome to everyone. Um, I'm really privileged and blessed to be a part of this, and I'm thankful to have worked with Jonathan Dover in the past and Michelle Miners. Um, the podcast that we had before, Native Paranormal Crossroads, was a great success for us, and we met a great many people. And so, being a part of the KGRA family, the digital broadcast family, we're really excited to go forward here with this program. We're going to bring you a lot of really interesting topics and podcasts on this particular show. So we're all really looking forward to that. My name again is Stanley Milford Jr. I have descendants of both Cherokee lineage and then Navajo lineage. My father is full-blood Navajo from the Navajo Reservation. I was born in Fort Defiance and grew up there primarily in the summer times when my father would fly me and my older sister Deborah out to the Navajo Reservation from Oklahoma. Uh, my mother's family is from Tahlequah, Oklahoma, capital of Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma, and that is really where I went to school from starting elementary school, kindergarten, all the way through elementary and junior high and high school, graduated high school there in Tahlequah, and later going to school at Haskell Indian Junior College, where I got my Associate of Arts degree, liberal arts, I'm sorry, liberal arts degree. Later, I went to school at Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado. And later, I attended the University of Arizona, where at the time I had started the pre-med program there at U of A. And I was contacted by a former boss or director of the Navajo Nation Parks and Recreation who contacted me and said he was needing a ranger for Monument Valley. And if I would consider coming back home and going to the Federal Police Academy. And I had a secret dream of being a law enforcement officer, and I took him up on that, and here we are today. So I did retire in 2023 on Cinco de Mayo, May 5th of 2023. I got an offer by HarperCollins Publishing and William Morrow to write a book about my experiences investigating the paranormal and supernatural cases that Jonathan and I managed while working with the Navajo Rangers. So glad to be here. Thank you, John.
Well, thank you for that introduction. Um, my name is Jonathan Dover, and I guess I'm taking up host duties today. We're going to be rotating that just like a wrestling tag team match. So as we go along, the other Paranormal Rangers will get their turns. And so in my background, I was well. I'll start out by saying that I'm Navajo, and I'm also Cheyenne or Southern Cheyenne, and I'm what they used to call Kiowa Apache, but they now call it Apache Tribe of Oklahoma. These are Plains Apaches, rode horses and had a horse culture and lived in teepees and camped near the Kiowas on a pretty regular basis. So when the ethnographers got there, they said, "Oh, we'll just call them Kiowa Apaches." And then I'm also part Filipino, so I'm covering the world here with a lot of different places, and somewhere in there there may be some Arapaho. So my ancestors were at Sand Creek. I'm descended from Chief White Antelope, and there's another chief on the Apache side, um, Captain Koso, that there's a relationship there. And my great grandmother was taken as a child to Bosque Redondo with the Navajo Long Walk, and she actually escaped as a little girl and made it all the way home. So there's quite lineage there. I got into law enforcement and uh, joined the Navajo Rangers in 1980. So I didn't even know what a ranger was, and they said, "Well, you're going to be doing all these things, um, everything involving resources." We handled natural resources, so game and fish, forestry, archaeology, agriculture, water resources, mines and minerals, with a mandate for search and rescue, and also being red carded in uh, fire suppression for wildland fire, and it was extensive training. I received over 4,000 hours of training in my 31 years and retired in 2011. Uh, both me and Stan, we were tasked with investigating paranormal cases, and I'll let him tell you the story of how we got assigned to those cases. We didn't volunteer. I always say that we got voluntold. Stan, would you tell him how we got involved?
Sure. Thank you, John. Um, John and I have traveled the world, places like Scotland and Canada and all over the US, presenting, conducting a presentation regarding the cases that he and I investigated over the course of the time that we worked under special projects together. And then later, after John had retired in 2010 or 11, was it, John, when you retired?
11.
2011. I continued on with the department and later assuming a delegated role of chief ranger for a little over 2 years. During that whole process, I was continuing to investigate these cases that would fall under paranormal and supernatural. So people often ask us when we travel about the world, how did you guys get into investigating these kind of cases? And so there was a case where there were two young rookie rangers that had been assigned to what people know and refer to as Sasquatch or Bigfoot. And there was an elderly woman who lived up in the Chusca Mountains, and this was often referred to as sheep camp during the summer months. So the elderly of the Navajo would herd their livestock herds up into the mountains, be it sheep or cattle. Or up there in the mountains, it's a lot cooler, greener. You have a lot more spring water, running water, and so it's a very nice place to have your cattle during the hot months. So she had her sheep up there, and according to her, one of these things that people refer to as Bigfoot stepped over into her sheep corral, picked up one of her sheep under its arm, and took off with it. And for the Navajo people, livestock is a way of life. It's very critical. It's a fundamental way and has been for since the very beginning. And so she called the department, and our dispatcher assigned these two young rangers to go up and respond to this call. They get up there, and one of these young rookie rangers, he's like a comedian. Everything he says and does is a joke or laughing, or he's just a joker in his personality. And I think really that when the grandmother heard him carrying on either back at the corral or at the patrol unit, she felt that he wasn't taking this particular case seriously. And so she recontacted the department, got the chief on the line, and I'm sure as any Navajo grandmother can do, she scolded the chief really thoroughly. And so with that, the chief called a department-wide meeting. He called in, at the time, we probably had 45, 40 plus rangers. He called in all our commissioned rangers, staff meeting, and he said, look, he said, you've chosen a career in law enforcement. And in doing so, you have chosen primarily one of two things, to either help people or protect people. And he said, you may not understand these cases that involve the supernatural or paranormal, but these people are asking for help. And a lot of times they're traumatized and they don't have anybody else to reach out to. He said, so when you get these calls, you're going to take them like you would any other call. You're going to respond professionally. You're going to investigate to your full ability. And he looks over at Jonathan and I sitting next to him, because we were already part of special projects. And he said, and you two are going to manage these cases. You're going to oversee these investigations and ensure that they're properly investigated and that it's done professionally. And John and I responded, yes, sir, which that was always our response to the chief. We respected him highly, not only being an elder Navajo man, but very wise in law enforcement procedures and capability. And he had been the chief of police for a number of years before he even became the chief of the Navajo Rangers. So John and I, it wasn't like we volunteered to be the Navajo X-Files or anything like that. Just like John said, we were kind of voluntold that this was our responsibility, and it was an official duty, an official assignment. John and I approached this reaching out to those organizations like MUFON and Robert Bigelow's group out of Las Vegas, because they already had investigators that were investigating UFOs and contact by extraterrestrial or alien species and beings. And we reached out to them to get their insight. And I'll let John talk a little bit more how we got into doing the presentations and all of that really quick.
Okay, so here we are starting to investigate cases, and as we went along, there was more and more information for everybody's. Just to let you know, we handled cases involving hauntings. We handled Bigfoot cases, and we handled UFO cases, and then we handled cases involving the fabled Navajo skinwalker. And those cases in particular can be very, very dangerous. And we wouldn't recommend anybody to go looking for these things. It's not about going out and being scared or anything else. It's something that can actually injure or kill you. And so we actually tell film crews that that's not what we're about. So as we went along, there was more and more information that we needed, and we were having to study all these subjects and find out how to best to investigate them. And at one point, we had a rather startling ground occupant sighting of UFO, and with an old man. We call it the old man case. And in order to gather more information to know which questions to ask, we contacted MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network in Arizona, and they sent us a copy of their investigator's manual that really helped. They also sent one of their investigators. Later on, we needed further information, so I told Stan, I says, Stan, get your tinfoil hat. We're going to go down to Fort McDowell to the International UFO Congress, and we're going to go see all the crazy people. And so we went down there, took a drive, and that's for us. For Stan, I think it's about a 4-hour drive down there. And by the time we got there and we started talking to people, we met people like Stanton Friedman and Kathleen Marden. We met Dr. Lynn Katai, and we met the leaders of Arizona MUFON. And they kept encouraging us that we needed to talk and we needed to speak. And we thought about it for a while. And finally, I told Stan, I says, I don't know about you, but I'm getting too old to worry about what people think about me anymore. So off we went and we spoke at Phoenix MUFON. And there was a little guy sitting up front, furiously taking notes on a clipboard. Turned out his name was Alejandro Rojas, and he was one of the editors for Open Minds magazine. And he invited us to come and speak at the International Congress in 2013. And we did, and made quite the splash. Had a lot of people just mobbing us afterwards, and took us 3.5 hours to talk to people out in the lobby until we finally got done. So that's how we got into speaking. And since then, I would say we've probably been doing about 100 different speaking engagements together or separately. Stan was still working at the time, so he had to kind of put it on hold. We both appeared on Netflix, Unsolved Mysteries. And we always tell people, if you want to really see a good show, we had told the producers at Netflix that we would not do that unless they gave did an accurate portrayal of us. And they came through with flying colors and did so. So when they did that, it really came out good. They had a really good cinematographer. And so if you go over to Netflix, go to season 3, episode 5. It's called Paranormal Rangers. So anyway, that's how we got into that. That's all the different things that we did. And since then, one or the other of us has been on Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. We've been on Skinwalker Ranch, Ancient Aliens, and what's there's Sirius, and there's just so many different TV shows. I always joke with Stan and Michelle and tell them that I'm going to live forever in reruns. So I may get old and wrinkled and shriveled up, but you'll still see me in my prime. Anyway, Michelle, why don't you tell us? I don't know if you have any stories for us.
Well, it's interesting, John. Thank you. Yeah, like yourselves, I didn't ask to. I wasn't really wanting to be in this space, to be honest. And as time goes on, you find yourself in situations and different parts of your life. And so when I was asked to go out to the Uinta Basin to assist in Brandon Fugal's ranch, I assisted in that and getting acquainted with the Native American community. They looked at me and Jim as the Jehovah Witness of that area because we worked so well together. And what happened was we were finding stories of people who had lived in the Uinta Basin, either all their life or they've had experiences and they didn't know how to share their experiences. And people would treat them as though that they didn't have these experiences. They thought that they were crazy. But I have done over 400 interviews of the Uinta Basin of individuals and their stories. And it's been very fascinating to me because I went there with a critical eye and I thought, oh, this stuff isn't true. One of the individuals I got to know was a gentleman. He's now passed on, is Junior Hicks. And Junior Hicks wrote a book with Dr. Salisbury, and it was really interesting to get to know him. He was in his 90s when we got acquainted, but to listen to his stories and his interactions with the Native American community and also the community at large. He taught at the schools. He was a master electrician, technician, and he was so involved in the experiences from early on. And he actually met with Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, at Bigelow's compound there in Las Vegas, Nevada. And it was really interesting to hear his stories. And so as things began to form, I was just listening and thinking, okay, these are really interesting stories. But what it got really interesting is when I started to have my own experiences up there in the Uinta Basin. So after, time after time after time, I was seeing things, I was visited. There's a lot of experience, and stories that I had to myself, and asked a lot of questions. And you had mentioned MUFON, where people go and they report what their experiences was, but that was paper. That was, forms they had to fill out. And so I didn't want to do that. I was a little apprehensive to talk. And there's another show up there, Dwayne Ollinger's, show, Blind Frog Ranch, The Mystery of Blind Frog Ranch. And then Brandon's is The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. I think I turned that around earlier. And had worked with both individuals up in the Uinta Basin, not because of their show. It was because I wanted to know what this phenomena was all about. So I had partnered up with a gentleman by the name of Jim Segala, who was on the first season of Skinwalker. As you mentioned, you guys were on some of their episodes. And we did some electromagnetic field testing and experiences out there. But what we correlated in the end, it was connected to the individual having the experiences that this phenomena would show up. And that's a little bit more scientific based. But what we found out is when an individual had experiences, there would be a reaction, a cause and effect in their lives that it would occur. So we have this 3 or 4 year study that we've done around the experiential experiences and of individuals in the Uinta Basin. And what we were finding is that the Native Americans seem to have a lot more experiences than, say, the community of individuals who lived there who were non-Native. And it was fascinating to me because I was also having these experiences at an experiential rate. And I didn't know what to think about what I was experiencing. And so I would ask a lot of questions. I would do a lot of field testing. I would go and have these extraordinary experiences. And I, would go and speak about it. But there was ridicule that was involved. And you guys, like you were talking about how you went your field office as field officers or, law enforcement officers, you were asked to handle these cases because the Navajo Nation and the individuals who live on our people look at this phenomena as though it is a part of the traditions of our lives. And where I was on the reservation, they did too, but the interesting thing is they didn't like to talk about it because they felt like it would be able to conjure up some of these things. And to your point, Jonathan and Stan, the skinwalker lore, you don't like talking about it. We don't like sharing that because we feel like these are part of our traditions and our way of life, to respect our own traditions on the reservation. But it's really interesting up there in the Uinta Basin, as you guys have been up there and have felt the anomalies that are up there. And then when I met John and we had dinner and Jim introduced us, and I just found it very intriguing that this phenomena is everywhere, worldwide, and we're now out there investigating that as a team. So that's kind of a little bit about me.
Well, thank you. We actually have areas on the Navajo reservation that
Mm-hmm.
would rival Skinwalker Ranch
Probably.
as far as the phenomenon goes.
Mm-hmm.
And we just don't advertise it. We don't talk
Mm-mm.
about it because a lot of the natives up here are traditional.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in a traditional sense, you don't talk about those things. You don't draw attention to it because to draw attention is to have it manifest even more. And they don't want that. And we've asked them over and over, why don't you report this to MUFON um, and let them do an investigation? And they tell us, well, if we tell somebody like that, they'll bring a whole bunch of people up here.
Mm-hmm.
They'll all stand around, sing kumbaya, and those sky gods will not come here anymore. And the Navajo, along with a lot of other tribes, have a tradition that they were visited in the past by sky beings or holy people who came to this land and told them, this is what you need to do, this is how you need to live, these are your moral values. You don't kill people, you don't steal, you don't, just all these things, that do's and don'ts about how to live your life. And I often tell people that some of the ceremonies that they have, there's always a clown involved at the end of the line. The Apaches have them, and the Navajos have them. And the clown represents the five-fingered people because the clown doesn't listen and he does what he wants to do, and
Mm-hmm.
usually the opposite of what he's taught. And so, for our audience out there, it's important to realize that there's a connection there to sky beings or holy people, and that this is why we do this kind of work, and we have to be respectful of those things.
Well, it's interesting, Jonathan. On previous shows, you spoke about the cavalry, how they came in and took away the ghost dance. And Stan and you both have discussed this on our previous shows, how that was taken away. And I think sometimes our nations don't want to talk about it because we hold them sacred, because they were taken at one time away from us in our tribes and everything. And like with my Pawnee tribe, we are too called the Sky People. And we have buffalo skins, because we were told that we are the Sky People. And we set up our communities as a result of these buffalo skins that showed where we planted our fields, where we lived, the night stars that we had looked upon as our guides and our gods. And so, we're not, nothing new to this. This is a respect things. And we like to tell our audience, it's a respect thing. It's something that we have lived with for millennia. And when something's taken away, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to be ridiculed. We don't want to be shamed. And so that still happens today with people who have these extraordinary experiences with the phenomena.
Stan, could you tell us, in your words, what happened to you when you were tasked with investigating a haunting case at an office building?
Sure. So these calls would come into the department and to the chief, and he would reach out to John and I to assign these cases. Sometimes when we were in the field, people would approach us uh, with their own experiences. And like what had been mentioned earlier and brought up by Michelle, uh, a lot of these experiences aren't always pleasant. A lot of times, and what John and I found was that these individuals were on some level traumatized by the experience,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was a teenage child that was experiencing and had witnessed a Bigfoot, or whether it was an elderly person having an encounter with these things. A lot of times when we first experience these kind of things, a lot of times it's out of the blue. We're going about our lives doing the regular things that we're familiar with, and then all of a sudden you have this experience. So chief reached out to me and he said that there was a director with one of the other departments under natural resources. They had staff that were experiencing all kinds of different strange, otherworldly activity within their office space, to the point that it was interrupting the workplace. So I began uh, going and uh, set up an investigation of that particular building. Chief afforded me and John to be able to reach out to uh, other experts in the paranormal field, even external of our department. So I put together a team and we went in on 2 days conducting an investigation. We did interviews of all the staff there, and one lady was getting this, really what most people would term as harassing phone calls, just call after call after call coming into her workstation. And when I first met with her, I said, "Well, you're gonna have to start documenting these calls coming in." And she ended up passing a spiral notebook to me, and there was page after page after page of calls that had come in. And she had actually reached out to the phone company and CI, Criminal Investigation with Navajo Nation, to try to get some assistance in finding out who was doing this, who was wherever the calls originating, and even the phone company could not determine where the calls were coming in from. And so it was very disturbing. One of the phenomena I experienced going into that investigation was what was termed an apport. So back in the spiritualist movement of the 1880s and further on into the 1900s, they come up with this word apport, which meant it was describing when you take a physical object that would appear out of nothingness, or sometimes objects would disappear and but there is some type of movement of a physical object. In this case, in the haunting case, it was coins. There would be U.S. coins, nickels, pennies, dimes, and quarters that would fall out of thin air, fall out of nothingness. Right, right here in front of us. it would fall on the floor, or sometimes they would come flying across the room and hit us. And so for those 2 days investigation, there was a total of 66 coins that appeared, but we documented those coins, photographed them. In criminal investigation, when you have evidence that needs to be logged, you'll one of the techniques is to measure out from a corner of a room to the object, from one corner and then from another corner, because those are fixed points of reference. So you'd be able to take those measurements and determine an exact location. And we use GPS too. At that time, we began using GPS for different things. But a total of 66 coins. The coins would behave like any other coin that you would pull out of your pocket and flip in the air. They'd hit and they'd make a big arc and spiral in and fall over. Out of all the 66 coins, they all landed heads up. And for most people, going through school and science and learning, when you study statistics and probability, you know that that won't happen. They won't always land heads up or tails up. It can't. It'll be generally half and half heads, half tails, depending on how many times you flip it up. So, but over the years, we had analyzed the coins, the years. There was a higher frequency with these wheat pennies.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's 7 or 8 or so within that 66, which was a high rate. But in the end, I came up with just the general understanding that this was spirit that was communicating with me, because there was an attachment formed to me that still exists to this very day. But it was spirit letting me know, heads up, I'm present. I'm in that space in and around you. And natives, have this understanding. Times animals communicate. There's a spirit communication through animals. Sometimes these are omens or warnings or things to be cautious of, to be alert of. Maybe there's something dangerous coming up and it'll try to warn us. But that's kind of how I look at this stuff. I've talked to medicine men and shaman about the phenomenon, and it's never been anything that had any type of negative energy associated with it. So it happens in my home. And the last one, I think, in my home was on New Year's Day, I believe. And I think I've had a couple more since then when I've been out. But it's very unique. And that case was very intense. A lot of different types of phenomena, things moving, chairs flying across the room, things exploding, voices captured on audio, seeing shadow stuff, within that building. A very unique case, very, very eye-opening, definitely.
Hey, Jonathan, why don't you share what happened like 3 weeks ago with our show with all three of us as we were experiencing what happened? We wish we caught some of it on camera, but we had wished what happened afterwards. Would you like to share that, John?
Yeah, we wrapped up our show, and we were all getting done. It wasn't recording anymore, and so we were just kind of kibitzing with each other and talking about the show. And Michelle heard something behind her, this bang, and she looked behind her, and she was startled, to say the least. And I started looking for terrestrial explanations right away, and I said, "Was anything stacked up against the wall behind you that fell over?" And she says, "No, something smacked into the wall." And so we went from there, and after a little bit, she looked around and she found a square aluminum can on the floor that was it's a small one, and it was full of balm, uh, so it had some weight to it. And then she found where it had struck the wall. And so she's facing us, she's facing the camera, and this thing hits behind her on the wall. And you could actually see a dent in the drywall. And she took the can and matched up the corner to where the impact was. And we were just sitting there going, "Wow!" Of all times, we didn't have the recording running, and a paranormal event happens right with us there. So things tend to happen all the time. Sometimes we're aware of it. Sometimes we find out about it later. And one of the things that we do as paranormal rangers is we would probably not be very entertaining on TV because we wouldn't be running around screaming and our hands up in the air. Ah! Uh, you won't see that with us. We're going to be pretty, uh, down to earth, look at it and try to find an explanation. Sometimes there are terrestrial explanations um, for what you're seeing, and we've actually Stan investigated one case where this guy saw lights coming up from the horizon every evening about the same time, and he was saying they're UFOs and they're blinking off and on,
Mm-hmm.
and Stan went out there and took all his. We used to call Stan Inspector Gadget because he carries. If you need a battery, if you need a pen, if you need any kind of thing, he probably has it in his backpack. And so we rely on him rather extensively when we forget things. And he went out there and he took a compass reading and then waited for this phenomenon to happen. And pretty soon, sure enough, the lights came up and they were blinking and, off and on. And the guy was getting really excited, hey, there it is, there it is. And Stan took the compass reading and the azimuth and correlated it with a quad sheet. And there was a community just over the hill from that location. And what they were seeing was the lights of that community during a temperature inversion. And it gives you a mirage, just like when you're at the ocean and you see a ship that looks like it's floating in the air. Um, so it's just warm air and cold air meeting, and it creates a mirage in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what they were seeing. And Stan told them, this is a mirage. This is what you're seeing. And believe it or not, the guy says, "Oh no, those are aliens. They're coming." And he just wouldn't believe Stan's explanation for that situation. And so Stan just closed out the case and says, "Okay, we found out what it was." Um, so yeah. One of the things we do is we never respond with fear, because to respond with fear is to give whatever that thing is, to give it your energy and allow it to manifest even more. And so we don't like to give it any additional energy.
John, you talked about that incident that happened off camera, but what was going on camera that exact same show? And Stan did a shout out to Darth Vader. Do you remember that? We
Yeah,
had a we
yeah.
had a we had a guy coming on, and he sounded like he was wearing a mask, like Darth Vader breathing technique. And Stan and I, we were like, everybody, do you have your like, is your microphone working? And we have somebody, but there was nobody on the broadcast that was making that sort of sound because we were all talking.
And
And
we were all muting our microphones too,
yeah,
if I remember
exactly.
correctly.
Yeah, because we were told to mute. And it was really interesting to me that sometimes these phenomena will show up during the show. Just the audience, don't freak out. It was really fun. It was a fun audience that day because they could hear it too. And that was what was so fascinating about that show is our audience was responding in our comment section. So those kind of things will happen. It will happen on this show. And I'm excited for that, for them to understand this phenomena as we have experiences. They get to experience with us.
So we're getting ready to close down here. I think our time is getting close. So Stan, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I would like to say that um, this particular episode is just the introduction of our podcast. It doesn't really get into the meat and potatoes of what the three of us, have done in the past with these productions and podcasts. And some of them get really, really exciting, just like Michelle and John had conveyed, where we actually got some interaction by some type of energy or entity, and so it is really exciting, and especially as we move forward and we get some interaction with our audience, we'll get some really unique questions and a different perspective a lot of times from kind of out of the blue, and it really makes a fun show. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing, this podcast with everyone. I just really quick, I do have a book out. It's entitled The Paranormal Ranger. It is Navajo Investigators Search for the Unexplained. You can find this anywhere you can buy books, Harper Collins or Barnes and Noble. And so I'm really excited that everyone is really interested in putting this book out there, because I think it does explain a lot of this phenomenon. I also would like people to, if you're really interested in the work that we've done in the past, you can go on to Netflix, as John said earlier. Netflix Unsolved Mysteries, season 3, episode 5, and you'll get a taste of the stuff we're going to be talking about. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. Hey, just a shout out. I'm going to be at the UFO Con at 2025. Make contact on the Bay. That's in the Crown Plaza at Burlingame, California. This is the UFO conference where woo woo meets wow. So y'all go to the website. If you're in the Bay Area, come out April 4th, 5th, and 6th. And thank you, everybody, for being and following us to this new platform with KGRA. And we want to say thank you to KGRA for taking us on.